Hey y'all! Welcome back to Andy's Little Homestead. Let's face it, electrical can be scary. It can be a little scary like bears, or it can be really, really scary like your wife saying, we need to talk. But much like dealing with bears, it is not an insurmountable task. The other day, me and my buddy Josh got this whole place wired up, and after doing it for the first time, I'm here to say it ain't that bad. So I'm gonna walk through everything we did, how it works, the order in which we did it, and then we're gonna finish it up. I still gotta wire in a 240 for the dryer, because, well, chickens these days seem to be too good to dry their clothes outside in the freezing cold, so we'll put that in too. Now keep in mind, none of this is for human habitation. This is for chickens. This is an agricultural building. So some things may not be right, but they will work. That's good enough. If I had a lawyer, he'd tell me to tell you that this is not a tutorial. This is just what I did. And I'm not liable for burning your house down. I'm only liable for burning my own house down. So, first thing we did, we put in the breaker panel. All right, so pretend all these and the wires and everything else aren't there. It's pretty simple. This is 240 volts single phase coming in. I don't know what single phase means. I'm not trying to find out. But basically, 4 wires. 2 hots, a neutral, and a ground. When I say hot, that means juice coming in. I may say neutral and return kind of interchangeably, but that's what it's doing. It's returning. And the ground sends the wire literally to the ground for safety or something. Now, in our case, the closest power line's about 1/3 of a mile that way. So I bought a 50 amp RV cord, I hacked the end off of it, sent it through the floor. All wire goes into and out of the boxes through these little knockouts, and these clamps screw in place to hold them in. I'm missing the set screw right there, but the neutral goes to the neutral bus. All the little wires sit together on the bus. And all of our grounds go to the ground bar. So yeah, them two are easy. So that leaves our hots. Each one of these hots is 120. 120 and 120 is 240. And they each feed at different sides. Then from there, your breakers hook onto the hot side. So each breaker just snaps in place. And that little guy right there makes contact with that little guy in there to allow the magical juice to flow through. The breakers will only allow a certain amount of amperage through. So this one's a 10, 15, and so on. Now, I could be explaining this wrong. If I am, my bad. But long story short, electricity isn't shot through the wires like a plunger pushing a big old clog through a toilet. It's pulled through the wires by the device that is being powered. So a light bulb might draw less than an amp, and a big old skill saw might require 10 amps. As more electricity is pulled through, it generates heat. And at a certain point, that heat's gonna trip the breaker. Keep the wires in your wall from lighting on fire. You also have GFCI, or ground fault circuit interrupter, or arc fault breakers. I forgot the acronym for that. But we're gonna pretend we're wiring this like it's 1996, because most of this stuff is used anyway. Don't worry about all that. Too much juice, breaker trips. It'll also trip if black comes in contact with white, just looping right through without powering anything. How that works? I don't know. All right, so our breaker panel is in. The next thing to do is put up our boxes everywhere. Basically, anywhere there's going to be a plug, anywhere there's going to be a switch, anywhere there's going to be any sort of wire connecting to anything, you got to have a box. So we use 2 different types of boxes in this. First one's a nail up box. It already comes with the nails. And down here, it has these little tabs that set the box out from the wall to account for drywall depth. Now, when we're done with this place, it's gonna look like it's 100 years old. So we have to go with the baseboard outlets because it looks old school and chickens are all about the aesthetics. But generally speaking, in modern construction, I think they're like 13, 15 inches up from the bottom. I don't know how tall. I didn't measure. The second kind of box we use is what's called a cut-in box. That's these right here. If you've got a spot that you're not going to be able to get a hammer in to nail the box up, or if you're working on drywall that already exists, that's what a cut-in box is for. It's got little tabs on the top and bottom and screws on the face of it. So you cut a hole, you stick it in, you screw them screws out, and them tabs will flip up and suck to the back side of whatever material's on the wall. Pretty dang fancy if you ask me. So we put all of our boxes up, and it was time to start pulling wire. We used 14 gauge Romex for everything, with the exception of the dryer, which we still got to install. But let me show you all the simplest circuits so you can see what's going on here. Now, certain appliances like a microwave or a washing machine require a fair amount of power. As such, they're on their own circuit. 1 breaker, 1 outlet. So that's what we're going to take a look at. So we pulled a bunch of wire through the walls. One end of it goes into the panel, the other goes to this receptacle. On the receptacle, you got gold screws and silver screws. You also got a green screw. The way I always remember it is black gold, you know, like Texas tea, like Beverly Hillbillies. White, silver, green, ground. So the Romex jacket is ripped back. Strip a little bit off the ends of the wires. Put a little loop in it, clockwise, because that's the way that the screw tightens down. And it's screwed down in place. So I'm gonna button it back up and show you all the other end. One other thing I want to mention, I'm a big fan of service loops. You just take a little extra out and fold it back over. Not a tight fold or anything, but it's kind of a gift for the next guy who has to work on it if he has to trim wire back or do anything different. Considering the next guy to work on this is probably going to be me, seems like a thing worth doing. So with the wire run back through the walls to get to the panel, comes up through here. Neutral splits off, goes to the neutral bus. Our ground goes to the ground bar. Then our hot, we looped up and over to this breaker. The reason I did all the fancy swoopy loopies is the same reason that I did the surface loop at the other end. If this gets changed around at some point, I want to have the extra wire in there ready to go for whatever I happen to do next, which is as much a mystery to me as it is to y'all. So that's it. That's the complete circuit. Let's take a look at another one that has multiple things on it. So you can see we've got 1, 2, 3 outlets in the kitchen area. No reason that chickens shouldn't be able to make a nice breakfast for themselves. And all 3 of those are on the same circuit. Random little guy up there, that's for a microwave. Because there's no reason chickens can't make themselves a nice hot pocket. So you'll see that this outlet looks a little different than the others because it's a GFI outlet, or GFCI if you want to be technical. Commonly called a GFI outlet. So basically, electricity going to ground is electricity going where it's not supposed to. When electricity goes someplace it's not supposed to, you have problems. So basically, this outlet detects whether or not any of the juice that's coming in has ended up going to the ground. If it does, just like the breakers, it'll cut it off. So if you imagine the breaker is that way, because that's the wire coming in, this GFI outlet protects those 2 additional down the line. How does that work, you ask? Magic. Just like all electricity. It's just witchcraft. So we got our wire coming in, black gold, white silver, green ground. But because this one's not the end of the line, you have another silver, gold going back that way. The wire that goes down the line is tied, whoops. The wire that goes down the line is also tied in. The colors match up. Now the ground only has the 1 ground screw on there, so we just pigtail the grounds together. So juice goes into this outlet and is running parallel down the line from there. That's it. That's all it is. One thing to keep in mind when you're sending them home to Jesus is you want to make sure that that bare copper ground wire isn't touching the screws on either side. Not a big deal. You'll know. It'll just keep tripping. Won't work. Now, because the chicken house is off-grid, we're actually going to have propane lights all the way throughout here. So we only have 1 overhead light, and it's going to go to that wire right there. Got a combination light fart fan. So that's actually the only thing that's on a switch in here. But on the switches, it's pretty simple. It's just got 2 screws. It only disconnects the hot. The neutral and grounds are just pigtailed together. So that's the basic explanation of everything we did so far. Let's go ahead and pull the wire for our dryer. The chicken's dryer, not our dryer. An important thing to remember if you want to be like a real electrician, leave your trash on the floor. Don't pick it up, that's someone else's problem. So this is the breaker we're going to use for the dryer. As you can see, it's got the 2 contacts so it can contact both sides of the hot feed side thing. There's a lot of terms in there, man. I don't really know all of them, but it takes the 120 and the 120 and that makes 240. There. So our black and our red, which are both hot, are going to here. It's 2 wires, it's got 2 screws. White to neutral, bare to ground. And there we go. She's all hooked up on this side. A quick thing, it's probably a good idea, I can't say from experience, but from what other internet people told me, when you're hooking this up, you want to do it in a specific order. So I got all my runs coming in labeled. So I'll rip the Romex down and separate all of them. And then I got all the grounds, they all get hooked up. And then all the neutrals, they all get hooked up. And then I fish my hots around to where they need to go. I've never installed a panel that's been inspected, but I've been around when panels are being inspected. And like most things in the construction industry, if it looks neat, it's probably right. So they stop looking for little things to gig you on. All right, so now on the outlet side, we've got a 3-prong, 240 volt. Quick side note, if I've been saying 110 and 220 instead of 120 and 240, it's the same thing. But yeah, 240 volt outlet. The 2 big blades are the hots. The 1 little one at the bottom is gonna be a neutral. But hang on, Andy, you got 4 wires. Well, see, here's the thing. The dryer that's going in here is an old one. It's just got 3 prongs. The modern ones have 4. Why that is, I don't really know. And there are plenty of 240 appliances that have no neutral, just 2 hots and a ground. But everything that I read said that the little one is supposed to be neutral. So we're gonna hook it up to the neutral. Ultimately, they'll be tied together anyway, and at least I'll have an insulated wire if it does happen to be a neutral. Wait, hold up a second, Andy. You got your grounds and your neutral separated here in the panel. You just told me they're all gonna be tied together eventually. Well, yeah, and that gets into a weird thing. And again, I don't know why this is. I'm sure someone can explain it to me. But here's the short version of the long story. At the final point of disconnection from the power source, your grounds and your neutrals are tied together. That can be done in various different ways. I think the square D panels have a bonding screw that actually goes in to tie that to that, and it's taken out. I don't really know. But the thing is, this panel is technically a sub panel. The final point of disconnection is going to be the 50 amp breaker on the generator outside. So that's where they would need to tie together. Do they tie together in the generator? I have no clue. Have I ever sunk a ground rod next to the generator? No. So, you know, we're just going to see what happens. It'll probably be fine. Anyway, the outlet. All right, she's all done. Well, except for putting the fart fan in. My wife still has to tell me where to put it. She told me like 3 times already, but I forgot. Should mention for that, I used 8 gauge wire. Only actually need 10 by code. 8 gauge is pretty big for a dryer, but if you have like a long run from panel to dryer, I'm not hurting anything by going up. In fact, most of this system is pretty overbuilt. I mean, the kitchen, I got 3 outlets. The chicken roosting area, I got 4. None of the runs are very long, and all of them are on 15 amp breakers with the exception of the dryer, which is on a 30. It's overbuilt, and I'm hoping that overbuilding it makes up for some of my incompetence. I'm sure there's things I did wrong. Unfortunately, I won't be able to test it out today because I bought a new set screw for that. I can't find it. I have no idea where it is. Plus, there's a whole crap ton of snow on the ground. I don't want to have to wrestle the generator in place. I'm sorry to disappoint, but it'll probably work out just fine. And that's what it's all about. In all honesty, I've spent a lot of my life intimidated by electrical, but once I did enough research and fully wrapped my head around what was happening, it's pretty simple. Juice goes out, juice comes back in. Don't give it away to go somewhere it's not supposed to go, and don't overload it. That's kind of it. I'm curious to know what y'all think. You know, y'all who actually do this kind of thing. This is like farmer grade electrical, but I'm pretty happy with it. I think it'll work out well. I think the chickens will be happy with it too. Y'all, I'll be honest with you, I'm pretty happy with how my life turned out, but it hasn't been without struggle. Y'all, when I was growing up, everybody told you to go to college. That was it. That was the path. It was the only path. If you didn't do it, you would not be successful. That's just not the case. I honestly wish that I had learned this earlier on in life and maybe pursued it. Unlike framing a roof and it doesn't beat your body all to hell, you can do this well into your 60s and 70s and you make way more money. If somebody had said, hey, look, maybe you're not necessarily college bound, but you kind of like the idea of doing the trades, man, you can work for 4 years, get your apprentice hours, take your test, and write your own check, dude. I had a guy who did service work. All he did was service work. Shout out Jimmy Floyd in Lewisburg, North Carolina. And he had a fair number of guys working for him too, and it was $100 per man per hour, no matter what it was that was happening. And all he was doing was just little stuff. That's the power of knowing how to do things. So don't be scared. Give it a shot. Try and do it safely so you don't burn anything down. It's a skill worth learning. And I'm still learning. I look forward to learning more. As always, I hope y'all enjoyed and I hope you learned something. I love you. And God bless. There's a lot of stereotypes about all the trades. You know, roofers are drunks. Electricians don't clean up their mess. Painters smoke a lot of weed. They're all true. They're all 100% true. There are like some exceptions, but not many.